Today, we're going to talk about a story that is incredibly difficult, but so important to understand. It really strikes at the very heart of our trust in the healthcare system. It's centered on a nurse in a UK neonatal unit, a professional who is supposed to be protecting the most vulnerable lives imaginable.
And that brings us to the haunting question at the very core of this case. How does a protector become a predator? It's a question that challenges everything we think we know about safety and trust. So let's try to unpack the events that forced everyone to confront this terrible possibility.
So our story begins in what should be one of the safest places on Earth, a neonatal unit. You know, it's a place of quiet hope, filled with dedicated people, whose only job is to give these tiny babies the best possible start in life. Trust is, well, it's the absolute foundation of everything that happens there.
And at the heart of this unit was a nurse named Lucy Letby. And by all initial accounts, she was seen as completely capable, a caring and dedicated nurse, exactly the kind of person you'd want, the kind you would entrust with your child's life. And that's where this all starts, with that perception of complete normalcy.
But underneath that surface of routine, day-to-day care, something truly horrifying was starting to emerge. It didn't happen all at once. It started subtly, as a series of devastating tragedies that at first just seemed like awful, isolated medical events.
Let's look at how this unfolded over a few years. Back in 2015, an unusual number of unexplained collapses and, tragically, deaths began to occur. By 2016, this wasn't stopping, and some quiet, private concerns started bubbling up among the staff. Then, in 2017, the frequency just hit a crisis point. It wasn't just a sad coincidence anymore. It was an undeniable, terrifying pattern.
And this brings us to a really critical turning point in the story. Those quiet concerns, those hushed conversations among staff, they just couldn't be contained any longer. The people on the front lines, the ones witnessing these tragedies firsthand, they started connecting the dots, and they knew they had to speak up.
So in 2018, those concerns became official. Her colleagues formally reported a deeply disturbing correlation they had noticed. Lucy Letby was consistently present during these sudden and unexplained collapses. This was the moment the institution was really forced to confront the possibility of something truly unthinkable. And here's where we see the system's tragic disconnect. On one side, you have the staff on the ground pointing to the numbers, pointing to the anomalies, and suggesting the terrifying possibility of foul play. But on the other side, the initial internal response, well, it failed to find conclusive evidence right away. And that disconnect, that delay in taking decisive action, had absolutely tragic consequences.
With the internal investigations really not getting anywhere, the situation finally had to escalate beyond the hospital's walls. The evidence was just accumulating, the staff reports kept coming, and it got to the point where law enforcement had to be brought in. This was no longer just an internal hospital matter, it was about to become a full-scale criminal investigation.
In 2019, the police officially took over. And they just methodically started piecing together this incredibly complex puzzle, digging through medical records, CCTV, and of course, crucial witness statements. All of this work culminated in Letby's arrest in 2020 and led to a long, harrowing, and very public trial that spanned years.
The end of the trial brought a verdict, yes, but it also forced a much larger, much more difficult conversation for everyone. This was no longer just about the actions of one individual. It was about the system that allowed those actions to go unchecked for so long.
In 2023, the verdict was finally delivered. Lucy Letby was found guilty. It was a moment of justice for the victims and their families, but a moment that came after years of just unimaginable pain and loss.
And this is the crucial point, the main takeaway from all of this. The court made it absolutely clear. This wasn't just about one rogue nurse. It was about systemic failures, it was about missed opportunities and delayed responses that created a situation where these crimes could continue for years.
So, in the aftermath, a wave of reforms was sparked. Changes were made to enhance hospital monitoring, to strengthen safety measures, and critically, to improve the procedures for staff to be able to raise the alarm and actually be heard without delay. The whole goal is to try and make sure something like this can never, ever happen again.
And that leaves us with this final, really sobering question. We can put new protocols in place, and we can stress the need for vigilance. But is that truly enough to prevent something this unthinkable from ever happening again? It forces us all to think about the very nature of trust, accountability, and the systems we build to protect the most vulnerable people in our society.